Chris Brown, Chris Trapasso with you on a Monday. One Bills Live is the show, and pleased to be joined now by NFL Network draft analyst. He is hard at work this time of year, maybe more so than any other, chopping up the tape on prospects. It is the one and only Bucky Brooks. And Bucky, first, thanks for giving us some time because we know you are busy this time of year. Holy crow, with all the stuff you're churning out on NFL.com, doing the Move the Sticks podcast on NFL Network, chopping up the draft. Have you had a chance to breathe here?
Yeah, this is a busy time of year, but it's a fun time of year because after the Super Bowl, everyone gets an opportunity to reset, recalibrate, and then the optimism and the hope for the next Super Bowl champion starts in earnest. And so it's been a great run with free agency nearing a conclusion. All eyes on the draft, and so this is a fun part of the year.
All right, so let's begin with still a perceived need position for the Bills. All rumors about DeAndre Hopkins trade aside, as there's a number of teams hoping to land him, I guess. But Jaxon Smith-Njigba is at the top of your wide receiver list in terms of your recently released top 5 by position in the draft class. A lot of people label him arguably the best route runner in the draft. Do you come down on the positive side of that argument?
Absolutely. I'm with that. He reminds me very much of a young Stephon Diggs in terms of how Stephon Diggs is able to really win with precision and polish on the outside. This dude he is mature beyond his years when it comes to his route running ability, the diversity, and the stuff that he puts in his routes. Worked primarily from the slot. Didn't have a lot of production this year due to injury, but when you go back and watch the previous season, he is terrific. He works the middle of the field. He's fearless, great with the hands. I love the ball skills and those things, but this guy gets open. He gets open against any and all comers. He should be a fantastic pro.
I have a question about another receiver, Quentin Johnston from TCU. You have him as your number 3 wide receiver in this draft class. And really, at the beginning of this pre-draft process, it kind of felt like he was going to be the first receiver off the board, nowhere close to where the Bills are picking later in the first round. Your colleague, your Move the Sticks podcast partner, Daniel Jeremiah, mocked Quentin Johnston to the Bills at 27 in his most recent mock draft. Why are you a little bit maybe lower on Quentin Johnston than some other analysts? And do you think if he was there at 27, it would make sense, just in terms of what he does on the field, for the Bills to ultimately pick him?
This receiver class is difficult to evaluate because there's not what we call a true wide receiver one, meaning a true number one receiver that when you pluck him, he's going to be the number one guy from day one. What you have is a lot of complementary pieces, meaning guys that you need to slot in certain roles. If you put them in those roles, they can certainly play at a high level and an all-star level even. Johnson is your speed guy. He's your straight line speed guy. He's big. He's fast. He has tremendous athleticism and tools. He's not necessarily a polished route runner, and he's what we call a body catcher, meaning you won't see him really extend and catch balls outside the strike zone with his hands. He prefers to cradle it. When you have guys that are like that, you almost have to account for a couple of drops here and there. Some of those drops may happen in key moments because that's who he is. He could exceed expectations, but you have to know at a floor level, at a basement level, he's going to have some drops, and he's going to have a tough time necessarily getting open, running precise routes. You got to keep him on the move to put him in a position to be at his best.
One guy you had in between Smith-Njigba and Johnston is Zay Flowers, the Boston College kid. Do you see him strictly as a slot because of the size, or are there offenses this day and age that could have him do more than just that?
I think he can do more. I think he can play all over the field. Normally when you play slot, that's the F position. That means you also are able to play Z, which is the flanker position, which puts you off the ball. So now you get to use space. You can have motion. You can do all these things to create opportunities for you to get off clean. Zay Flowers, to me, reminds me a lot of how Antonio Brown used to play. Lots of energy, great creativity when it comes to his releases and how he gets open, terrific ball skills. He has all of that. He showcases all of that. When he's on the field, he's an elite playmaker. And so I would expect him to have a lot of success because he can win using the craft, using route running skills, as opposed to just his pure speed and athleticism.
All right, so flesh that out for me a second here, Bucky, because you say creative with his releases. Just for the just for the fans out there, maybe explain what you're getting at there. Does that mean his releases have a wide-ranging repertoire, or is he just somebody who's clever in the way a defender might be lining up against him?
He's clever in terms of playing against the leverage of the defender. So whether that's in bumper run early on, people playing outside, whether it's facing a DB in space and he's having to work to the leverage of the defender's shoulder to kind of put him in a situation where he has to cover multiple routes and thing. He has all of that. You saw him there catch a 50-50 ball. He has a lot of things that you just can't coach. You just can't coach someone to catch the ball like this in the open field. You can't teach somebody how to track these difficult balls over your left shoulder. I mean, he kind of has it. He's a special player.
All right, I want to switch to the defensive side of the ball because right now the Bills, I think, have a pretty clear, glaring need at the middle linebacker spot. You have Drew Sanders from Arkansas, the Alabama transfer, at number 1 in your linebacker group. It's just an interesting group altogether, I think, because there's a lot of different flavors. Explain the differences between Drew Sanders and a guy that I like a lot, Jack Campbell, in terms of what type of linebacker they are and could bring to the Bills defense.
That's interesting because I just found out, I didn't know this, that Luke Kuechly was training Jack Campbell. And so when you think about the Buffalo Bills and the connections, there would be no one who knows more about Jack Campbell than the Buffalo Bills based on the relationship with Luke Kuechly. These guys are both interesting, and I love both of them as my linebackers. Sanders is a guy who has pass rushing ability. You talk about a guy who had 9, 10 sacks coming off the second level, plays hard, really relentless in terms of his approach, great instincts and awareness. And so for him to make, I would say, a very difficult transition going from an edge player to being able to play inside, to me, that speaks volumes about him. And then when you think about Campbell is just old school in terms of instincts, range, his diagnostic ability, controls the tackle box, and he has a strong nose for the ball. And I just think those instincts make it very, very difficult for offenses to deal with him. In both players, you're getting highly productive players. I would say Sanders is maybe the one that is a better blitzer, more effective after sub packages if you can move him around. But Campbell plays a position like it's been played for the last 35, 40 years, and it's going to be hard to pass that up.
And so, Bucky, the interesting thing, and I realized Nolan Smith is a completely different animal who you have listed as your second best linebacker. Obviously, he's a pass rusher by trade. What makes Sanders 1, I guess, and Campbell 4? What's the biggest difference between the two, if you could maybe split some hairs for us?
It's really not that big of a difference. When you look at these linebackers, it really comes down to taste and flavor and then projected role that you're going to play. The thing that we have a difficult time doing is because college football has become so positionless, it's hard to really label these guys, the old school labels, the traditional labels that you have on draft boards. Drew Sanders was an edge player that plays inside in Arkansas, but he spent most of his career playing on the edges. Nolan Smith is a guy that can play with his hand down. He can stand up, but then you project him to be maybe an outside linebacker that plays in a stacked position at the next level. Trenton Simpson, great athlete. Trigger fires a little slower than some of those other guys, but the athleticism allows him to make up for a lot. And then you have Campbell with the old school instincts, the old school thumper that plays in the middle. If you ask me the difference between Sanders and Campbell, it just comes down to taste. What are you going to ask the inside linebacker to do? Are you going to ask him to be incorporated in a part of the pass rush? Or do you want a traditional old school linebacker that can control the tackle box, can blitz on occasion, can play down the middle? Well, if that's the choice, then Campbell might be your guy. Either way, I don't know if you can go wrong with either guy.
Oh,
terrific.
Yeah, I have a question about the offensive lineman in this class because I think there is a scenario in which the Bills could maybe go offensive line relatively early in the draft, maybe even in the first round if the board falls in a specific way. Do you see Peter Skoronski, who is your number 2 offensive tackle in this class, offensive tackle only, or do you think he could play guard? Is that his better position? Because the Bills have a long history now in this Brandon Beane era of loving and prioritizing versatility along the offensive line group. And to kind of follow that up, already, is there any other of these top tackles that you think could actually move inside to guard in a pinch if they needed to?
Yeah, now versatility is to be coveted everywhere. And the reason why you want a versatile offensive line where you can miss a match is normally on game day, you only can dress 8, sometimes 9 guys. So 2 of those guys have to be swing players, meaning they have to play tackle and guard, you have to play center and guard, and you have to In a perfect world, you want to put your best 5 linemen on the field, and you want to be able to kind of reshuffle the deck to get it done. And Skoronski, he certainly appears to have that ability. He is technically sound. He's really flawless with his footwork. The thing that you worry about, the arms aren't necessarily prototypical length and those things. And so that's why you hear people project him kicking inside. He kicked inside, he'd be a terrific guard. That versatility is real, and it's one of the reasons why people love him. And with the rest of the guys, when you look at the centers, you think about John Michael Schmitz, you think about Luke Weipler, Joe Tippmann, those guys can kind of bounce around and do multiple things because they're super athletic when they're at the pivot. So that leads you to believe they also can play one position over to the right, left, and play offensive guard.
Knowing the Bills picked 27 here in round 1, it's unlikely they even get a sniff of any of those top 3 tackles. Maybe Darnell Wright slips down there, or Anton Harrison from Oklahoma. What can you tell us about those two? I mean, I know Wright played right tackle last year, and he's a massive dude. I'm surprised his feet are as good as they are, carrying so much weight. He seems to be almost a bit of an anomaly because you don't see fleet-footed guys carrying that kind of tonnage.
Yeah, no, you just don't see supersized edge blockers like that. This is a guy that has heavy hands. He plays with a nasty temperament. You already alluded to his ability to kind of move around. He's a big dancing bear in space. And when you look at him, you say, oh, this is a mauler, brawler type. He's just going to kind of lean and mash and maul people. But no, he has some ability that is really, really different. He plays on the right side, but I just kind of wonder. And once again, we've talked about like, hey, taking your best 5 and what you can do. He's a terrific right tackle. I wouldn't necessarily put him at left tackle. I just know that he is a dominant player. He could be a dominant player for a long time if he's positioned on the right side because that's what he's always done. That's his natural spot.
All right, Bucky, as a draft guy myself, I got to ask you, and I don't mean to really put you on the spot here. You can throw out any name you want. Who is that first-round guy, in your opinion, that you seem to be much higher on when you look around the internet, you watch other TV shows, listen to other podcasts, that the rest of the kind of draft community is not nearly as high on? Is there one player where you're just banging the table for that guy that you think he's a first-round talent or just way undervalued at this point as we're exactly 1 month away from the draft?
No, it's funny because I used to feel like Jaxon Smith-Njigba was that guy.
Yeah.
But now I feel like everyone has caught on after you kind of watched him work out. Let's go to edge rusher, and I'll say Keon White from Georgia Tech, to me, is a bit undervalued. I mean, he is a hard-working, relentless player off the edge. He kind of has some of that nonstop stuff that really fits in well if you're a blue-collar team, a team that likes kind of those blue-collar guys. To me, the Georgia Tech kid has a lot of that stuff that you're looking for. And the other one I would say is Brian Breezy from Clemson. You have to understand, when he was coming out of high school, he was a cast me out. He might have been the number 2 recruit in the country, had a really good freshman year, gets hurt. Then his sister passed away with cancer. And so that impacted the way he played. But once you look at the tools and you go back and you look at the production over the course of his time in Clemson, to me, I feel like people might be missing the boat a little bit on him and what he could be at the next level.
Speaking of defensive tackles, the last one I've got for you, Buck, is a guy that you had 4th at DT, Mazi Smith from Michigan, who may not be big in terms of body of work production, but is in terms of measurables. We always see this all the time, almost every year, Bucky. There's always some of these big guys that look like they have all the physical tools, but there's a risk. You wonder what you're getting. And I'm wondering if Mazi Smith falls into that boat. What's the risk level there?
Well, the risk level is the production doesn't necessarily match the prototypical physical dimensions. But Michigan has had a few of those guys in recent years that have been like that. Rashad Garrett was like that, great athlete, but you never saw the production. And then it takes a little while, but then it pops for him in Green Bay. Mazi Smith is that great athlete, but I think he has a bad stance. He kind of sits in that stance like a frog. And so you never see him really come out and explode and dominate. But then he's in Bruce Feldman's freaks list, and you see the numbers and just what he does in terms of moving weight and jumping and all of this stuff. I mean, this is you talk about like a world-class athlete at that size. And so some of it depends on the coaching and what you have in the building and who's going to touch him. He has a lot of potential. And so sometimes in this class, there are a lot of decisions that are made more so on potential than production.
Right. What are we thinking? Like probably early day 2 for him, or do you think he sneaks
I think
into
borderline. I think borderline. I think you can see anywhere at the bottom of the first round, top of the second round, Mazi Smith goes. He rates as a top 45 player. A lot of it is, in my estimation, when I look at this draft class, normally you have anywhere from 18 to 24 guys that are first rounders. This year, I would say maybe you have 15 that would be consensus first rounders. So from 15 to 45, there are a lot of talented players, and they're going to be ranked in all kinds of order. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him go at the bottom of the first.
Bucky, thanks for all the insight. We appreciate the time during this busy time of year for you. We'll keep a lookout for more of your stuff on NFL.com and on NFL Network. Thanks much.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys.